Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us for today's webinar. We're going to give folks just another minute or so to log in and we'll be getting started soon. Thanks again for being here. All right, it looks like attendees are rolling in this morning. Give it another maybe 30 seconds and we'll get started. All right, well, good morning again. Let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2023-2024 Better Buildings webinar series, dedicated to bringing you the latest actionable insights from leading industry experts. This annual series is a chance to explore the topics, technologies, and trends that affect your organization, as well as efforts to accelerate decarbonization and energy efficiency adoption. So today's webinar, we're really excited to bring you, is called Home Energy Score 101, Assessing Efficiency and Savings. But before we dive in, I just want to cover a few housekeeping items. First, please note that today's webinar will be recorded and it will be archived on the Better Buildings Solutions Center, and we'll be following up when the recording and slides are made available. Next, all attendees are in listen-only mode, meaning your mics are muted. If you experience any audio or visual issues throughout the webinar, please just send a message in the Q&A box located on the bottom of your Zoom panel. So my name is Patty Capaz. I'm going to be your moderator today. I have been working on the Home Energy Score program at the Department of Energy as a support contractor for a little more than a decade now. Our wonderful program manager at DOE, Megan Plog, is unfortunately home sick today. And so I'm filling in kind of last minute, and I'm also on the tail end of COVID. So bear with me, but I'm going to do my best. But I'm really happy to be here with you all today to hopefully share some great information about the Home Energy Score program. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll quickly give an overview of today's agenda. So we're going to kick off with some polls in just a minute. And then I'll turn it over to our wonderful speakers. We have my dear colleague, Torsten Glidden, who is a technical lead for the Home Energy Score program. Well, I'm going to start out, give a little high-level overview of the program. I'll hand it over to Torsten to dive a little bit deeper into more of the technical side of things. And then we'll hand it over to Eric Cathcart from Earth Advantage, who's going to share some great information about how Home Energy Score reports can be customized by our partners and things to best meet the market needs of their stakeholders. So it looks like, I think we're going to go now to, and then we'll end with the Q&A. So first, we really want to learn about you. So let's start off with a few polls. So please join us over at Slido to respond to the following questions that we're going to pull up. And if you have any issues, please message our tech support team by using the Zoom Q&A function. So we're going to get started with a question. So which sector best describes your organization? This is hopefully an easy one. I'll give you all a minute or so to respond. Okay, great. It's shifting a little bit between local government and NGO, but it looks like nonprofit or NGOs is taking the lead, followed closely by local governments. Oh, contractors are kicking up here. So it's a great mix of NGOs, contractors or consultants, some local governments, utility programs. We've got some state government folks, higher ed represented, some multifamily. There's a nice long list. So thanks for playing. It's good to know who's on the call with us today. All right, we've got one more poll here. How familiar would you say you are with home energy score? Let's see who's going to take the lead. It's kind of fun watching the bars moving. I'm easily amused. Okay, let's give it another 10 seconds. Get your votes in. All right, it looks like about a third have minimal familiarity with it. About another third are somewhat, or maybe a quarter to a third. I'm rounding up. Not at all, about a quarter. Moderate, about 15%. And then let's see, extremely, if we can scroll down a little bit. There's a few that are extremely familiar, and maybe that's all of us on here, and maybe it's some of you out there. So that's great. It's a good mix. We're hoping that for those of you who are already familiar with the score, that hopefully hearing some of this information again or in a different way may be useful to you. And if you're brand new, we hope that it's really helpful to your efforts. Excellent. All right. Oh, there's one more. Were you in attendance at our Better Buildings residential network in June? Yes or no? And it's okay if you weren't, obviously. Ooh, looks like, oh, I thought that was yes. Just kidding. Okay, it looks like most folks were not at the Better Buildings residential network. Oh, the webinar, I'm remembering now. There was a peer-to-peer exchange call back in June where folks, home energy score was the topic, but some folks were requesting kind of a deeper dive to better understand the program, and that's what led to this webinar today. So great. I think that's it for the polls. Is that right, team? Yes. Okay. So I'm going to kick things off with a quick kind of higher level programmatic overview of home energy score. So if we can go to one more slide. Great. So the Department of Energy created the home energy score to be a low cost miles per gallon type rating for homes that's easy for consumers to understand and can be used to reliably compare the estimated energy use of one home to another anywhere in the country. So whether you're a homeowner and want to better understand the condition of the house you're already living in and some ways you can improve it, or maybe you're a renter or a home buyer and want to know what you're getting into before making a big commitment, the home energy score can help provide that insight. Home energy score can also be a powerful tool for program administrators using the aggregated data collected to get a better understanding of the housing stock, which can help inform where their programs need to invest resources. So the primary target market for the score is existing single-family homes and attached homes like townhomes and row homes. And we're really excited that coming very soon, the scoring tool will be adding the ability to score manufactured homes and individual units in some types of multifamily buildings. So we're really excited about that. I'm not sure if Torsten might be talking about that, but so be on the lookout for that added capability to be able to score some types of multifamily buildings and manufactured homes. So we can go to the next slide, please. So home energy score is considered an asset rating as opposed to an operational rating, meaning that it's really, the score is based on the structure and major components of the home, and it assumes standard operating conditions for things like thermostat settings and plug loads and things like that. So if you look at this nice little triangle graphic here, everything within the dotted line is considered an asset. So typically those are the things that are kind of fixed to the house and convey in a home sale. So the building envelope, obviously, so the walls, windows, roof, attic, foundation, whether or not the home is air sealed and insulated, and then the major equipment in the home, like the heating, cooling, and hot water systems. So that's what we mean when we say it's an asset rating. And then on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see a sample score report, or really the first page of the DOE produced score report. And this one you're seeing here is really the most simple option we have. I think Torsten's going to go over a few of the different options. But our partners are also able to create their own customized reports with their own look and feel that highlight the metrics that are important in their markets. And so Eric at the end is going to dive in deeper into that. So home energy score kind of at the basic level, it's an easy to understand 1 through 10 score, with 10 being the most efficient, 1 being the least. Really, a 10 means it's a home that's estimated to use the least amount of energy. 1 is going to be the biggest energy user. It includes an energy use estimate broken down by fuel use, fuel type, and it also includes a list of cost-effective recommendations for saving energy that pay back in 10 years or less. So we can go to the next slide, please. So one of the really great things about Home Energy Score is how versatile it is. It's currently being used by local governments in disclosure policies, both for home sales and renters. It's used by states to create consistent statewide labeling frameworks that cities can use for mandatory policies, should they choose to do that. It's integrated into utilities' existing programs, where the score really is an easy add-on to the services the utilities are already providing. It's used by community action agencies and others to help low-income homeowners find ways to save money. And it's also linked with mortgage financing products offered by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, where the recommended improvements can be financed as part of the mortgage. So we can go to the next slide, please. So here's just a snapshot. And this map is a little bit outdated, including we need to add Florida there as one of the city of Gainesville has a rental ordinance that includes the home energy score as part of all of its rental inspections. So this is a little bit outdated, this map, but it's really just a snapshot of the numbers. So our partners around the country have scored more than 220,000 homes. We have over 400 certified assessors that have gone through DOE's free training and passed the test and been mentored and are out in the field scoring homes. And there are about 14 active application programming interfaces, or APIs, meaning about different tools that are linked with our software directly to make it easier to enter the data and things like that, which is great. So if we can go to the next slide. So this is a kind of a snapshot of all the different states and local governments that have some sort of a home energy score policy or program. And it really has been growing in the last number of years. The cities of Berkeley, California, and Portland, Oregon were really the first to require the home energy score in real estate listings. So when a home goes up for sale, they're required to disclose that information to prospective buyers and include it on real estate listings. And since they did that, a number of other cities have been following suit, primarily ones in Oregon, kind of following suit of Portland, but now there's others cropping up in other parts of the country. And I need to add to this, the city of Ann Arbor, their logo isn't included here. I believe they just recently passed a very similar policy that will require home energy score in real estate listings, which is exciting. I mentioned the city of Gainesville requires a home energy score as part of its rental inspections. And then there's a few other different use cases for how folks are using it at point of major renovation or in reach codes, a couple smaller cities in California. And then I mentioned some states, the first one being the state of Oregon, that has this framework that creates a standard way of recognizing official home energy scores in the state. And now the state of the state of South Carolina is getting ready to do a very similar voluntary statewide program, but one in which local governments can kind of lean on it to promote their mandatory policies, should they choose to. So there's a little snapshot. We'll move on to the next slide, please. So here, really, just to recap that home energy score can be used in a variety of ways and has a number of benefits to both consumers and programs in helping to transform the residential energy efficiency market. So for consumers, it's a great way to help homeowners, renters, and buyers understand how much energy a home is expected to use and what that could mean for their utility bills, and provides a list of cost-effective improvements that can help cut costs and energy use. For program administrators like cities, states, utilities, and others, all of the data that's collected can provide insights into the state of the housing stock in a particular area and can help decision makers determine where to target program resources or incentives for upgrades And all the data can also be used to help track the impacts that is having in the market and help really drive real estate market interest. And finally, by getting more and more home energy scores integrated into the real estate transaction, for example, in places where it's required in real estate or rental listings, it will help build that pool of data that's necessary to enable valuation of energy efficiency and ultimately can help drive consumer demand for that efficiency. Next slide, please. So here I just wanted to quickly show one example of how home energy score data can be collected, aggregated, and shared in different ways. So this is a screenshot from the Green Building Registry, which Earth Advantage out in Oregon built. It's being used in Portland, Oregon, and other markets to house the home energy score and other home energy data that is then publicly available for consumers to see. So you can go into the Green Building Registry, type in an address, and if there's a home energy score or other data for that home, you'll be able to see it. And I think the next slide shows a little example of an individual home. You can see that there's a home energy score and what that is. You can download the full score report. You can also see the estimated energy bills and things like that. And then the real estate professionals and customers can access that information directly. All right. I think I have one more slide. Okay, great. Sorry, I was trying to make sure I was on the right slide. So there's been some great research that's been done that looks at the impact of home energy score on home sales and user behavior when it comes to real estate and rental listings. So last year, the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, or LBNL, put out a study that showed that in cities where home energy score is required in real estate listings, so where there's a high concentration of scores, essentially, that a higher home energy score was associated with a higher purchase price. Specifically, they found that 0.5% higher purchase price for each point increase on the home energy score scale. And similarly, that for every $100 increase in estimated energy bills, that was associated with a 0.4% decrease in purchase price. Another set of studies was done by ACEEE. They did a couple of controlled studies that put energy information like home energy score on mock real estate and rental listing websites, so these fake sites, and got users to participate in the study. And they found that including energy labels encouraged renters and buyers to select the more efficient listings more often. And they also showed that listings with a home energy score and the corresponding 1 to 10 scale and estimated energy costs led to higher click rates of energy efficient properties. So that's interesting on kind of on the consumer behavior, user behavior side of things. So this is all really exciting and encouraging and validating of the home energy score's value and role in helping to transform the market for energy efficiency. So thanks a bunch for hearing me out. I'm gonna switch it over to Torsten Glidden, my good colleague. So Torsten is the technical lead on DOE's home energy score. He heads up the program side efforts to maintain and develop the software user interface, API, and backend database environments with representatives from 3 national labs, the National Renewable Energy Lab, or NREL, Pacific Northwest National Lab, or PNNL, and Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, LBNL. He also supports partner and assessor participation in home energy score, from onboarding and training through program design and operations, data analysis, and quality assurance oversight. Torsten is awesome. He does a huge amount of work, and we're so grateful to have him on the team. So take it away, Torsten.
I'm not sure I deserve all that, Patty, but thank you. I do appreciate it. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our overview of the technical side of modeling and impact with home energy score. Next slide. And so it all kind of starts with collecting data in a home. So the way home energy score is designed, partners manage assessors. They get them registered to be candidates for training. Those that are qualified to do so typically have an existing credential like they're a HERS rater. they have a BPI building analyst or building science principles certificate. They're a home inspector, that sort of thing. And then once they go through this training of ours, which is a 3D simulation training that's available online for free, 24/7, 365. Takes approximately anywhere from half a day to a day to get through, depending on someone's comfort level. It can take longer if you get to sort of mix it in with regular work activities, of course, and strategies for getting assessors through training. So we can, if someone's interested, elaborate on that sort of thing a little later. But anyway, once they get through training, then they conduct data collection on their mentoring home, and they would use a form like this, the Home Energy Scoring Tool Data Collection Form. It is effectively the form and structure how and what data is collected on a home in order to generate a home energy score. So this example of it here, it's linked. Let folks peruse that at your leisure. I don't think my cursor activates any of these things, so I'll move on from trying to get you the URL image. But then also, if you're more interested in how the home energy score works, there is a methodology paper that can be found online, linked here in this set of slides, which will be available to attendees after the presentation. Next slide. So again, an assessor collects data in a home. These are the basic categories, sort of where the home is located, what its relative size is, those things about the home, its age, number of bedrooms. And then characterizing the building envelope, the windows and the skylights, the heating and cooling, and any additional key asset-based equipment. And that next sort of rectangular bubble on the bottom left is the sort of landing page login for the home energy scoring tool online. And that's the main interface that PNNL manages and provides for users, for assessors to enter their data to generate a home energy score and manage the scores they have already done, as well as for partners to manage assessors' work within their partnership and perform QA on their work and so on. QA requirement is 5% of all activity, of all official score activity. Official scores are characterized as initial scores, final scores, and corrected scores. There are other types of scores, test scores, alternative EEM, which is sort of like a way to demonstrate different scenarios. So running hypothetical improvements on a home, as well as QA type, mentor type, and pre-construction for homes that don't actually have addresses yet and are really just working on a set of plans as opposed to something that's physically characterizable already. And then from there, once data is entered into the home energy scoring tool, it's taking data from NREL's climate database, which is really TMY3 climate and weather data, and that's been sort of adapted for use for the score on the back end of the scoring tool, and defaults developed by LBNL, and then run through the modeling engine, which is an Energy Plus based tool. It also produces, interesting to note, an 8760 file, so an hourly data file. So energy consumption estimates can actually be extracted and reviewed on the hourly level. So folks that are interested in time of use related energy consumption issues in homes might be interested in being able to make use of that. So hourly by end use. And then we actually use state average energy costs and emissions data. So there's a GHG, or carbon emissions metric as well with it that the tool can output from EIA that gets updated on a semi-regular basis, but it's not like a momentary snapshot in time. So for those seeking to make more nuanced, up to the minute determinations about energy consumption, you would be able to take this kind of data and apply other things that about characteristics in your specific area, in terms of cost and that sort of thing to make use of that data. So data comes out of the tool in two forms. For those inside of the home energy scoring tool, it comes out as a exported CSV file. If the user, so the partner or software provider, is engaging with the scoring tool via API, then they can pull that data back via API in the form of a couple different data formats, actually. So, but suffice to say that it's very easy to make use of in both of those two different pathways, and the transfer of data can be done again either through the scoring tool directly or via API, but it does build under a partner's profile in the scoring tool, so they can always come in and use that as their like dashboard to access data in case their API isn't working momentarily or for whatever reason. It's easier oftentimes to so interact with the quality assurance side of things that way. And then this in the lower right is an example of what the typical report comes out looking like. That's the front page and the back page. We'll look at that a little closer in another slide upcoming. So let's move on to the next slide, because I think is a little bit redundant to the coming slide. So what does the score mean? These are scoring bins. It runs from 1 to 10, as Patty mentioned earlier. 1 being the highest consumers. So you look down at that bin for number 1, and you can see that it is these are homes that are expected to use more energy each year than 85% of US homes. And you see it's a very large bin, because what you're seeing is the full width and breadth of how inefficient a home can be, right? So that's a big, that number 1 bin is a big scoring bin. It's got a lot of little outliers and edge cases. And then once you get to the middle, right at a 5, those homes are expected to use approximately each year 50% of what a typical home in the US uses. And then once you get to a 10, those above a 9, right, are at the 90th percentile, and they're homes that are expected to use less energy than 90% of US homes. And that's obviously the goal for most of the homes that would seek to get a home energy score. Is like, you want actionable information about how to make a home more efficient, right? And these, for the sake of a little background, these comparisons to US homes are based on a residential energy consumption survey, REX. It's the slightly older version right now, but within a month, it'll be based on the 2020 REX data. So we expect to see a little bit higher resolution coming out of scores sometime soon. And that gives you a general sense of how things work. You see that long tail because, in order to get to a 2, those homes have to be, have to start to have some energy efficiency. And then once you get up to the 10s, that's a very small bin, because you're running out of room to improve at that point. If that makes sense. There we go. Thank you. So again, there's the scale upon which it's based. It are these 5 basic categories that we sort of touched on before. And it's interesting to note, even though there are a lot of things here that go into the score, there are only about approximately 50 required data inputs. This is intentionally lighter than some of the other whole home characterization and modeling tools out there. I won't name any names at the moment, but it is designed to be a bit more user-friendly. Now, of course, it's not perfect, but what the National Labs feel is basically the minimum data points required to produce a home energy score. So you have things like, again, year built, number of bedrooms, stories above the ground. So you're characterizing, stack effect potentially in some cases, ceiling height. So you're characterizing volume, conditioned floor area, right, is the other part of that volume. The orientation, so how much sun is exposed to, the air leakage rate. You can actually do inputs for performance-based measurements as well. So for blower door, and a little bit further down the line for heating and cooling, duct blaster measurements can be entered as well. Is there professional air sealing done? What type of home it is? And then characterizing the building envelope, so attic ceiling construction, roof, foundation area, the walls, and whether they're the same on all sides, whether they're multiple attics and multiple foundations, this sort of thing. Windows and skylights, glazing types. You can actually enter specific U factor and so heat gain coefficient if you need to, or have that information available. Let's see, so heating, cooling, you can characterize multiple types, multiple areas served as the distribution system. So the ducts, their location, their level of sealing and insulation, and then of course the cooling equipment as well. And then water heating type, and we're actually working on getting the ability to characterize its location as well, which becomes more and more important as we develop out additional types of support for things like manufactured housing and multifamily. Especially when you're characterizing multifamily, you often have these units that are using shared equipment, or they in many cases actually have their own. So there's an important distinction there in terms of energy consumption. And then solar PV, you can characterize the orientation, the size of the system, and that sort of thing. Next slide. And again, this is sort of a magnification of one of those earlier little images. This is the front page of a standard report. So it gives you the score, and it can tell you other things that you want to communicate to customers and so on. And things like annual energy cost and what the score basis was, as a percentage, how inefficient this home currently is, the amount of money on utilities you can potentially save each year. CO2 emissions reduction, all that sort of stuff is possible to show in the report. You don't have to. On the next, I think the next slide will show different options. But on the back end, and there are some pages in between, which I didn't have room for, but it gives you like a rundown, like a list of the data entry, and shows that to the consumers. So it sort of fully characterizes what went into the score in order to generate that score and the recommendations on the last page here, which is on the right side. And you get what is produced with the score, which is a set of actionable recommendations based on simple 10-year payback. So what's cost effective under these circumstances? And the repair now is like, well, this is always going to be cost effective. You do it, right away, and it'll make an improvement to the place. The replace later is more of a, when you have a water heater go out, you might consider replacing this. When you have an issue with, it's time to replace your heating system, or your cooling system, it's time to take a look at replacing the heat pump as well, because it'll save you this. What's also interesting to note is that these recommendations are optimized, so they're designed to be the best package. So while individual recommendations might not be cost effective on a 10-year payback by themselves, as a package they are cost effective with a simple 10-year payback. With that in mind, it's also worth noting that upgrades to a home are not so much a destination in many cases for these homes, it's a journey. So it in its updated form may not lead to the same score you saw on the initial report. That's an indication of doing all those measures at once. So just something to sort of help manage expectations with people you communicate with, customers and so on. It's designed to be easy to understand and easily consumable. And this data populates to a partner's, an assessor's count, but also a partner's count. So it's aggregable, and it is highly recommended for partners to take a look at their data and see where patterns are, and where it might be good to try targeting potential customers with high potential for improvement opportunities of a higher impact and magnitude. So, and it's also designed to link to financial products in the industries, in the industry, to get people to be able to do these upgrades more cost effectively. I think Eric might be getting into that a little bit later, so I'll move on. Next slide. Here's an example of the report options. You can see it's also customizable. So down in the lower portion, the footer, if you will, you can add logos for your program. You change, add the name of the program, the state it's in, that sort of thing. So it is somewhat customizable. One can also, as I mentioned before, you see the label types A, B, and C. There's varying degrees of added information on the page. Depending on the program, you might want a more, a heavier content on your page, or something that's a little lighter, more, sort of visually impactful and easy to communicate quickly. Next slide. Just real quick, this is kind of an indication of what, sort of the current score and potential upgrade of the homes is. Year over year, there's not a huge difference. What's interesting to note is that when we moved from like all recommendations have to be discretely 10-year payback, cost effective, to a system where the package needed to be cost effective. So not every single measure necessarily. As a package, they were more cost effective. We did get a slight bump on the high end of the scale between sort of how the home is today, the current score, and what the upgrade potential is, that score. There's a few other things to note here. I won't get into too much detail, but it is, again, for some homes, we saw that long tail for bin number 1. It is possible for a home to not have much opportunity unless they really do a lot of upgrades. So in some cases, depending on the cost effectiveness, it's still possible to see sort of a 1-to-1. So it's important to, have that in mind and be able to have those conversations with customers. Sometimes their home, targeting homes is a good idea, and sometimes their homes are going to require more work than is quote unquote cost effective. So just an important thing to keep in mind in advance, so you're not surprised, you're managing expectations as much as possible. Next slide. And just an example of some of the impact that home energy score has had in recent past. We do see this climb a little bit every year. It seems like the improvements to the scoring tool seem to work iteratively. So typical score today, and then score with improvements, you get from a 4.6 on average to a 7, 20% energy efficiency on average. Again, that's with doing all of the improvements recommended. And it's worth noting that if you take the approach of doing this sort of alternative EEM, different, like good, better, best scenario setup, you can obviously get higher percentage savings on homes. It just takes a little bit of analysis work in order to make that happen, which can be done either by manual input, or in theory, one could set up an API to generate multiple alternative EEM scores. And I think Eric might be getting into something along those lines in his presentation, so I won't belabor that too much. But over the years, and actually for 2022, we've had a significant impact in terms of energy bills, at least in terms of what the potential is, 13.8 million, based on the number of scores we have, and 48,000 tons of CO2 potentially saved from the atmosphere. So there is real potential to make an energy efficiency and climatic difference out there. So these are some of the most popular upgrade recommendations that tend to be very cost effective. And I think I won't get into too much of that. These are kind of the usual suspects: air sealing, duct sealing, heat pump water heaters, and insulation, that sort of thing. And next slide. I think just a quick set of links for folks that are interested in more information. For partners, becoming a partner, that first link, this is just sort of an example of where these really long URLs are and why the other ones are just embedded. But the Better Billing Solutions Center, energy.gov, home energy score, and then from there, there's a bunch of things that tell you more about the home energy score, depending on what you're interested in is, becoming an assessor, becoming a partner. Partners need to fill out a partner implementation plan, so that link is here. And then I mentioned earlier, assessors need to hold a relevant professional credential to qualify them to take the assessor training. You're always welcome to contact us at homeenergyscore@ee.doe.gov if you have any questions. Next slide. And I also want to point it out that one can demo the scoring tool online on their own if they so choose. It's important to note that this is not an official score. For the very least, the data wasn't collected by an official or an active home energy score assessor, but it is for demonstration information purposes only. But it does give you a sense of how it's put together, what data points go into it, and what the resulting score label looks like. So if anyone's interested in that, you're more than welcome to check it out. But again, do not share it publicly because it is just for info and demo purposes. And with that, I will hand it off to Patty and to Eric. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Torsten. That was hopefully really helpful to all of you on the line. We're going to kick it over to Eric Cathcart now. Eric is the Director for Technology Services at Earth Advantage. In his role, he's focused on partnering with the public and private sector to build or enhance IT solutions that help to reduce the climate impact of the built environment. For over 10 years, he has worked on, I don't know how to say this acronym, SaaS platform development projects from UI to software architecture. He currently oversees the development of Earth Advantage's own green building registry and home energy fit software platforms. So before I hand it over to you, Eric, I just want to give a quick reminder to our audience to send in any questions that you have via the Slido website. That's slido.com with event code DOE. So Eric, please take it away. Thanks.
Thanks, Patty. As Patty mentioned, I've been working at Earth Advantage quite a long time, and during the course of that time, we've interacted with the folks at the Department of Energy and Better Buildings Home Energy Score since its inception, really, on a number of different programmatic consulting issues, training and support. We do quality assurance all over the United States. And as Patty mentioned earlier in the slides, at the beginning, we built the Green Building Registry to hold home performance data that we can populate into real estate listings. Next slide. So we actually started working on custom scorecards, labels, reports. People have different names for these. Before the Home Energy Score actually launched, there was a federal program that funded 4 states to develop home energy improvements using local programs. And we used at that time a different algorithm developed by Michael Blasnick called Simple. Michael's now at Google Nest. Next slide, please. So the real launch for us in terms of custom reports came when we were approached by the city of Portland, who is going to launch, as Patty mentioned earlier, the second mandatory home energy score program in the country, and the first one to really focus on time of sale. And so we worked with them over the course of several months to create what they wanted in terms of branding and design and actual elements on the scorecard to produce what you see here on the screen, which is still being used today. Next slide. So over the course of time, we've worked on a lot of different custom scorecards. You can see there's some reasonable similarity between them. Different programs like to mimic what other programs are doing because they recognize they've been successful. In some cases, we work with the state of Oregon, who then provides funding for various cities who want to go mandatory within the state. And so there's a kind of templated scorecard report there. So you can see the city of Hillsborough, city of Milwaukee, the city of Bend, all in Oregon, are underneath that umbrella of the state of Oregon, and they all have their own scorecards because they have mandatory programs. We've worked with the city of Fort Collins for quite some time, the state of Missouri. We've recently started working with the state of South Carolina, and we are currently working with the BayREN program in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we're actually in the midst of redesigning that scorecard on the top right you see there to launch in January of next year. Next slide. So there's a number of reasons why programs want custom reports. I won't read through the list, you can read it yourself, but essentially it comes down to really wanting to shape the brand of what they're trying to do and also highlight different features and recommendations over what home energy score might produce in the standard report. In many cases, we also add localized utility rates to our calculations to produce these scorecards. As Torsten mentioned earlier, normally it's an average over a state. We will literally apply whatever the local utility rates are for where that scorecard was created, that report was created. Next slide. So what's moving forward right now, the HERO program on electrification of homes is having an influence on these report designs. There's a much greater focus now and awareness of carbon reduction than there used to be. That used to be sort of the hush-hush not talked about out loud. And of course, there's the Inflation Reduction Act of last year, which is going to push a lot of federal rebates and tax credits and local incentives across the country, which is the specific city and state requirements. And then we're going to see, and I believe the home energy score already has the ability to do this, time of use utility rates, which, as you might realize, if you use your electricity in the middle of the night, you're going to get a lower rate than you do at peak times. And then there's a push toward easier shortcuts for homeowner resources. So using the report as kind of a gateway for homeowners to get to more information. Next slide. So last year, a team of us at Earth Advantage, anticipating HERA and other movements toward electrification, designed a sort of templated electrification pathway report is what we call it. The idea would be to actually hit the API for home energy score 4 separate times. You heard Torsten mention the EEM method there to produce different scenarios related to different phases of a home fully electrified, all the way from improving its shell and the core recommendations to fully electrifying the home, meaning no gas at all, no other fossil fuels, no wood burning stoves, to adding solar and battery. Next slide, please. The other component that we've been working on is alignment with an anticipation of the Inflation Reduction Act. So we created, in this case, a template for allowing assessors to provide an unofficial score that shows how they might achieve, in this case, 35% standard energy savings related to the IRA, and there would also be a 20% one. And we would this would also allow them to create scenarios. The assessor could create scenarios, hit the home energy score API until they got the results they wanted, and then they would create the scorecard, which would be a snapshot for a homeowner to set them on the path to get the IRA rebates and tax credits. Next slide, please. And in addition to that, obviously, you're going to want to capture work that was done in the home that actually achieved this goal. And so in alignment with that, we created another template, which we call almost a certificate, which would be an official score, but would capture actually what was put in and installed in the home. And you can see in this case, it has a state stamp. This is not official. Oregon is not actually using this yet. It's just an example. Next slide, please. And you can see how the back page of this report would look, where we're actually a little bit tiny, but it's actually listing the various components that were installed in the home that achieved that 35% level in alignment with the IRA. And there's a history that we have of doing this. This just didn't come out of thin air for us. It relates to 2 different separate programs. Next slide, please. So we worked with Fort Collins for some years now. They have what they call the Epic Home Certificate, which is a home energy score report. They do an initial score, which is just a single page to get a baseline on the home. And then they track within their program what was installed in the house and what the upgrade resulted in terms of savings and the new score. And they provide this information to us directly at Earth Advantage through an API connection with their program that supplies that data. And then we produce a report and we store it on the Green Building Registry. Next slide, please. In a similar instance, we've been working with the state of Missouri for many years. And in their case, they produce a gold and silver certificate related to work that's been installed in the home. And when a homeowner achieves a certain level, in this case, a home energy score of 8 or better generates a certificate. So when you visit the Green Building Registry on certain homes in Missouri, you will see that they have both a home energy score report and they have this custom certificate, which would align with what I showed you earlier in our design for capturing Inflation Reduction Act installed entities. Next slide, please. And that wraps it up for me. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. I can put you in touch with anybody on our Home Energy Score team related to either the Green Building Registry or our program support, our consulting with states and municipalities. We do a lot of different things around the Home Energy Score, as well as quality assurance, I should mention. That's the link for the Green Building Registry there. If you want to visit it, it's free. Anybody can type in an address and search for it. If we have data on it, you'll find it and it will bring up the relative home performance components, including a home energy score if we have one in there. And you can also visit our website. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much, Eric. And again, Torsten, that was great. So I wanted to just say before we transition to the Q&A, I wanted to encourage folks to download our additional resources handout that was, I believe, shared in the Zoom chat box. The handout contains links to resources from Better Buildings and our speakers on today's topic. So we hope you find that useful. So let's go ahead and move. We have a few minutes left for questions. Let me just switch over here real quick. If you haven't already, please join us at slido.com. #DOE is the event code to submit and upvote any questions. So we're gonna, let's see, we've got a lot of great questions in here. I'm gonna try to hit the few that have been upvoted the most. I'm gonna answer. So Roshina Ham had a question. In locations where there is not an organized effort to support this, is there any potential for a homeowner or renter to calculate their own home energy score? And Torsten covered this, I think, on his last slide, that we have that you can produce an unofficial score on your own through a user interface we have. Torsten, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. One can, again, use that guest scoring tool to get a sense of what things probably would be. Again, it's not an official score. Can't use it for programs or incentives or anything like that. And if someone were to need to, they would then need to find out who can come and do an official score in that area. And we'd like to see more partnerships start up in places that don't already have that. So, reaching out and contacting us and saying, hey, here's where I am. I'd love to have an official score or home energy score in general. And there don't seem to be any assessors I can find in this area. That helps us, have conversations in different parts of the country and encourage growth of partnerships there. So.
Absolutely. Thanks, Torsten. Another question came in. The DOE supports both Home Energy Score and Building Performance Institute, or BPI, certifications for energy auditor inspectors. What are the differences and why aren't they combined? Torsten, you want to take that one?
So Home Energy Score is a way to collect data and generate a score through a specific tool. Building Performance Institute certification is an approach to interacting with buildings and being able to collect data for many different uses. So ours is a use case. BPI is the certification that gets auditors or assessors or data collectors to a level of understanding that allows them to interface with and interact with a lot of different potential use cases for building data collection. I think that's the best way I can characterize that.
And we do, so there's a set of credentials that we require in order to even, for an interested assessor to take our training to become a home energy score certified assessor, you have to meet some sort of building science or building related credential. And several of those are from BPI. So we do accept those certifications.
Many of BPI certifications are a prerequisite, a pre-qualifier for taking our assessor training for the home energy score use case, if you will.
Great, thanks, Torsten. This was just a comment. When I mentioned back during my slides that I believe that Ann Arbor had recently passed an ordinance, and that is indeed true. We have Zach from the city of Ann Arbor just confirmed that. So thanks so much. So home energy score will be required at time of listing. That passed back on just about a week ago. Awesome. Glad to have you, Zach. Okay, next question. What do we have? We got a couple more minutes. So why is age considered part of the energy score? If an older home has been updated, it should be valued similarly as a new home. I think that question probably was from my slide on what ASIC scores are, and the triangle and age is down at the bottom. So maybe we can just clarify that, Torsten, if you understood the question.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a huge impact. It doesn't like change the, calculation by itself. It is just one of many inputs and something to consider in a holistic sense. But of course, in so many cases, homes have been modified, they've been added on to, they've been updated over the years. And we actually have guidance that like, basically if more than half the home is of one vintage versus another, you enter the one that is predominant. So it is a small component of consideration, and there's some basic assumptions behind the tool, but it by no means is like a really heavily governing component, because there's so many other factors that are impactful on home energy score and consumption estimates.
Great. Thank you, Torsten. There's a lot of great questions in here. I'm going to just cover one more and then we're going to move on because we have a few things before we wrap up. I just wanted to reiterate a question that I answered in the chat from Rick. He had a question just to make sure everyone understands if home energy score is calculated based on a per square footage basis or for the whole home. It is for the whole home. So all things being equal, if two homes are constructed identically, but one's larger than the other, the larger one is going to score lower because it has a higher volume of space to heat and cool.
You can, just on a side note, Patty, though, you can get an EUI metric metrics out of the export and or via API. So if you're
thanks for that, Torsten. Perfect. Okay, great. So thanks so much for those questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them. We'll try to maybe amongst us presenters, we'll try to respond to as many as we can directly in Slido.
Patty, I think you're on mute. Unfortunately,
I sure am. Thank you, Torsten. I just want to thank everyone again for participating today. This webinar is part of the 2023-2024 Better Buildings webinar series. As you can see, we have a great lineup of presentations through March. So please visit the Better Buildings Solution Center to learn more and register for those. We hope you'll join us on Tuesday, October 3rd for our next webinar titled The Grass is Always Greener, Best Practices for Water Efficient Landscaping. Ooh, that's fun. Join this webinar to learn from partners about best practices for curbing water use to cultivate sustainable landscapes. And if we go to the next slide, we want you to please mark your calendar for the U.S. Department of Energy's 2024 Better Buildings, Better Plant Summit, which will be held April 2nd to 4th in Washington, D.C. This event will feature engaging and interactive sessions, as well as opportunities for attendees to network with industry peers and national experts. So registration details will be coming soon. We also want you to check out season 1 of the Better Climate Challenge Roadshow. Our energy experts hit the road to see how our partners in the Nashville area are reducing their emissions. Watch as we visit Nissan, Whirlpool, and Chemours to see decarbonization in action. Are our partners on their way to meeting their goal of reducing emissions by 50% in 10 years? Will our hosts survive trying Nashville hot chicken? Tune into season 1 on the Better Building Solutions Center and find out. Ooh, this is exciting. I love it. So with that, I'd like to again thank Torsten and Eric for speaking today, and very much to all of you for taking time to be with us. Feel free to contact our presenters or myself directly with additional questions, or if we couldn't get to your question during the Q&A portion. I encourage you to follow the Better Buildings Initiative on LinkedIn and Twitter for all the latest news, and you can find our handles there by their respective icons on the left-hand side of the slide. You'll receive an email notice when today's recording, slides, and transcripts are available on the Better Building Solutions Center. And in the meantime, thank you all so much for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.